Hi, welcome to Go Tell Mom. I'm Dianna Kelly, and I've been momming for several decades, including tending my fur babies, kids I gave birth to, kids I mentored as a broadcaster and college instructor, my kids' friends, and my friends. I'm not a psychologist or doctor, but I do know how to dig up advice from those who are, and that's what I'll share with you. If you have something to share with me, remark, comment, question, please comment below. Okay, stop me if you've heard this before. You're about to go to bed when your teen pops up wild-eyed with bedhead and tells you she needs 24 cupcakes for school the next morning. Yes, this has happened to me. Not always cupcakes, but something needed for class. Always a last-minute trip to Walmart or a drugstore or some store with 24-hour service. Unless we're talking Halloween costume, and those I could usually cobble together. It's so much easier if the kids actually show you the requirement when they get it, so you can schedule it in. Of course, that requires setting up a schedule. Today's parent suggests holding a weekly family meeting to make sure you're all on track. Ideally, you do this a few weeks before the start of the school year. Set up your goals and priorities. If a goal is to improve grades in school, homework is a priority. Sleep should be a priority, and not just the kids' sleep. Every family member should add at least one item to the agenda. Your schedule could look like 7 a.m., get ready and wake kids. 8:30 a.m., drop kids off and drive to work. 9 a.m., respond to emails. 10 a.m., meet with client. 11:30, lunch with coworker. 1 p.m., board meeting. 2:30, Zoom call with client. 3 p.m., baseball practice. 4:30, drive home and pick up kids from practice. 5 p.m., homework, 6:30 p.m., dinner, and so forth. At each weekly meeting, go over what went well, what didn't go well, and how to improve the following week. Keep in mind you need to streamline your work time as well as your kids' school time to stay on track. FreedomSprout.com says weekly planning takes out the stress of disorganization. And remember, a planning schedule is designed to be flexible. Don't let your schedule dictate your life. The idea behind planning is to gauge how long activities take, so you know what will fit comfortably in your schedule. Another important planning is to post a schedule. A physical schedule works best when multiple people need to see it. Yep, I'd post rehearsal schedules and game schedules on the fridge, but you're better off transferring everything to a stick-up whiteboard calendar or magnetic calendar where you can mark down everything, not just something specific like bring cupcakes. When organizing your family calendar, CamilleStyles.com suggests including for each event, who and how you get there, and what you might need while you're there, and necessary contacts. Make sure you sync with everyone's individual calendars, creating a central family calendar. Camille Styles also mentions color coding the users and letting the kids pick their own colors. That makes it easier to see who's doing what at a glance. And giving the kids a choice makes it more likely that they'll buy into the scheduling process. Also, you might want to occasionally check your kids' backpacks. My son had a penchant for hiding his schedules in his, and it would be a crumpled mess at the bottom, and he'd never remember what was on it. Or at least that's what he told me when I found it. A family calendar doesn't work unless everyone's on board. And because the goal is to have a living document that accurately tracks where everyone is at all times, every family member has to be committed to making that happen, unless you like baking cupcakes at midnight. Now joining me is my friend and colleague, Sheri Waltz. Back in session. Parents' stress levels are going up, and so are the kids sometimes, depending on what they're involved in. So how do you balance kids' activities and their classes and everything else that's going on when you're a parent?
I think it definitely has to do with their age and probably also your flexibility in terms of work and life and all those other things.
Right.
But I definitely saw a big difference in what my kids did when they were little versus what they did when they were in middle and high school.
Yeah.
And so when they were really little, our kind of rule of thumb was that they had to do some type of a craft because they really enjoyed crafts. So
Yay.
They were very into anything artsy.
Right.
And so they did something artsy every I say semester, but that's just because I've always thought from a school academic,
of course,
perspective. So every fall they would do something, and every spring they would do something artsy, and then they would also have to do something that was activity driven. It wasn't always sports, although they did play soccer and some other things, but sometimes they did ballet, they did swim, they've done did like some hiking thing. They've done all kinds of things. Yeah. My always rule was you could sit and do crafts, but the other one you had to be standing and doing something.
Something active.
Yeah, something active. And so when they were little with that was harder in one sense because they had so many more things.
Right.
We had places to be, activities, recitals, contests, whatever that looked like more often because they didn't always do all of the same things. But for me, I was really blessed that at that point I still lived in California and my mother-in-law was there, and she helped a lot. And so she was that second hand to get them where they needed to be. My husband at the time, I'm still my husband, but at the time worked in the restaurant industry, so he had days off during the week. So that was really helpful as well. So we really had a support group that assisted with getting the kids where they needed to be, because all of these were usually through our community center. We had a really robust community center that we did. So it was all through the city and through the community, not through their school.
Yeah. We were lucky in that my ex-husband has 3 brothers, and at various times one of them would be living with us and helping with the kids from time to time, so if we were working late, they'd get them to whatever event, whether it was rehearsal or practice or whatever, they'd manage to get them there. But there were a lot of times when it was tooth and nail whether or not we were going to get to pick them up when they were supposed to, and once or twice we may have been a little late, and I hate putting that kind of pressure on other people that have to get home to their families, that are in charge of supervising these kids, whether it was when they were really little, they went to a Montessori school, so they'd have extra classes in like learning computers, which is kind of ironic since my son is currently studying that at TTU, or taking baby ballet lessons, but still just to get some sense of music and movement and that kind of thing. And my daughter studied commercial songwriting in college, so what they did when they were little kind of led to what they did later. But there was rehearsal and there were time classes and recitals, and the drill. You've gone through that with your kids and their music.
Yeah. So it definitely, it can definitely be difficult to juggle it all. And I know that you mentioned that you had forgotten them at once or twice or been late. And I'll just say that that is very typical. And still to this day, my oldest daughter, she remembers it very vividly. I don't think it was that dramatic, but she remembers being forgotten at school one day. Of course, that was at the time where my husband worked nights and I worked during the day. And so we were always juggling who would be picking up who. And I guess we just missed it, neglected to set that schedule. And one day after school, no one came to pick them up. And they were in the office crying. I don't know what they thought was going on, but they were crying hysterically. They had their Game Boy. And of course, I'm frantically trying to get over there and pick them up. And that was the one time. And to this day, I don't know, 10 years later, she still will mention it. And she'll say, do you remember that time when you forgot us? And I'm like, oh, honey, if you only knew what it took to keep us on a schedule, to keep us, this family moving forward, right? From everything from, making sure the laundry gets done and food is on the table and you're getting your homework done and you're getting to class and you're doing those activities. I think it's definitely, it takes a lot to manage that. And I don't know, we came from a very traditional household, and so the bulk of that work was on my shoulders. And I know that's different in a lot of different families, but it was definitely not always smooth.
Yeah. I mean, for us, I would rely on whoever the instructor, the supervisor, whoever was in charge of the extracurricular activity, sending home a list of when they had practice or rehearsal or shows or games, so that we would be able to sync that up with what we were doing during the week and know when we'd have to get somebody to where. But also to know when they would have time for homework. So if they had a big project coming up, they would have to make sure that they got to it well in advance and not do what they usually did, which was wait till the night before and frantically scream about what they needed for materials.
Yes. The very late run to CVS or Walgreens to get poster board or whatever.
Exactly.
I learned early on to keep a stash of that because I was like, oh, that just doesn't ever work out. I was fortunate that my kids were both very studious, so they they would get done what they needed to get done. Very rarely did they not turn something in, but we had many a nights where tears are, rolling because they forgot about something or they didn't have enough time to get something done or whatever that looked like. And it was difficult. We kept a master schedule. So that worked out really well for me because I'm just that type of person.
You are a planner.
I'm a planner. So I did also love it when teachers would send home the schedule and say, this is practices or this is when the games are. And when those things would come in, they would all go in my schedule. When the kids were middle school, high school, we kept like a family calendar. So we had an app where everybody was color coded and we could put in what everybody had to do. Excellent. And then I could message them through the calendar. And we don't do that now, but I still find myself, even now, I'll put in like the kids' dentist appointments. My kids are, 23. I don't manage their dentist appointments anymore, but I will still be like, okay, I know you have a dentist appointment coming up, because they'll say something to me. And then I'll be like, oh, you have a dentist appointment next week. And then I'll put it in my calendar just so that I can remember. I'm just so used to using the calendar as my memory tool that I don't remember things like that anymore. I just try not to. It's like just extra junk. So I use the calendar for everything. Like, this is what I'm doing. This is where we're going to be. And I think that I trained myself back when they were in middle school with all those events. Yep. And I just relied on that calendar to get me where I needed to be, whatever day that was going to, be.
Yeah. And I think that works well when you've got a calendar. I never used to be a calendar person. Again, I would look at schedules and all that. But then I discovered that if I didn't map out when my children had specific projects due as students, then again, we'd get the frantic last minute. They'd come home from rehearsal and say, I've got a test tomorrow, or I've got this project due tomorrow. Well, why weren't you doing it over the weekend when you were just futzing around on your Game Boy with your friends? And it would be easier if I knew when they had projects due. So we got to the point where we would put up a list of when they had projects due so that we wouldn't be missing something like that. Somehow, when they got older, some of those lists would disappear from the side of the fridge. So I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but yeah. And then I'd get the last minute frantic, or I'm going to have to turn in something late and as a professor now, I'm looking at it and saying that must have just really frosted the teacher to have to extend something for them. Some of them were good about it. Others were like, no, you're taking a 0. And just like with our faculty. But it's easier if you know ahead of time as a parent when they've got the big projects, so you can nag them.
Yes. Yes, definitely. I don't know. There was that fine line, right? I try hard not to be a nag, but I also am a doer. So it's like, if it's something easy, just do it. And then I don't have to mention it again to you. Right. So it's like, let's just be done with it, and then it's off the piece, right? So it's like, yes, you have something happening on Friday. Why don't you just do it today? It'll take 5 minutes, and then I don't have to ask you again all week if it's done, because it's already done. And I know that is difficult for my kids. But when we would look at the schedule, we would not just be scheduling, I don't know, because I'm a scheduler. So we would be scheduling everything, like from family activities. My husband worked, now when we moved to Tennessee, he works, he has more of a Monday through Friday job, so he'd have weekends off. But then we would be trying to plan around some family time. Yep. So family time would get put on the schedule.
And you have to do that.
Yeah, because if not, you just get busy. There's just always something happening, whether that was a special dinner we were going out to eat. We would, like to go see movies at the time, pre-COVID, but all of that stuff, we would have different things that we would put on the schedule, usually like once a month, that we, depending on their age, be able to still do something as a family, and, birthday celebrations and all of those family things. And that's why I just got really used to having all of that together, all in one place, all on one calendar. And what I liked about it was the kids could also schedule their own activities, and I'd be able to see them. So like if they were going to go to a friend's house, they'd put it in the calendar. And then I would know where they're going to be and all of that good stuff. But,
well, and it gives you more confidence as a parent when you see something like that, because then you don't feel like it's chaos.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times if you're a parent that wants your kids to be active and involved and busy, you don't want to have to cut it back because there's too much chaos. You'd like to be able to have it organized. So it's systematic chaos.
Yes, that's what I like. And then, of course, it all got way better when they started to drive. And then when they started to
take
drive,
themselves places.
Yep, I was like, okay, it's your schedule now. I don't need to know when rehearsals are or what days and what times, other than you're not going to be home. But I'm like, that's on you. You know, you get yourself there and you get yourself home, type of thing. And so it definitely ebbs and flows, right? So the age of the kid really changes how much scheduling we had to do and what type of scheduling we had to do. And then also, I think for us, for my husband and I, because we've had several different transitions in terms of our careers since my kids have been, around. That
Likewise.
Depending on, so depending on if I was in a corporate job, I had a much different type of flexibility than when now I'm as an instructor. I have a much different type of flexibility. So that really changed a lot as well. And I think it's good also just to see if it's not working, to stop and reevaluate. My husband and I have always had a really good system that instead of making New Year's resolutions, we always just evaluate how things are working, more about how we work as a unit, as a family, and the kids as they got older are also involved in it. Like, what do we want this year to look like? What didn't work for us last year, and how do we fix it this year? And there were many times where we'd have to talk about the schedule because I tend to be a little rigid. I tend to be a little less flexible. And I'm kind of like, no, it's on the schedule. We're doing this today. Everybody's doing this right now. And so we had to work a lot about finding a balance. And as the kids got older, they were able to communicate what that looked like for them and to talk about how they would schedule their free time, because I would schedule it out and they don't want that. They wanted more free time, free time, where they didn't have to worry about that. And so as they got older, we were able to talk about what that looked like, and they were able to influence the way the schedule worked.
So they had some decompression time.
Yes.
Yeah, because a lot of times it's really easy to get kids overscheduled. My kids would go crazy, and because summer would roll around, and because I was working and my ex-husband was working, we were, we'd be trying to get things scheduled for them during the time we were at work. And they're like, can't we just stay home and, have a babysitter and maybe occasionally go over somebody's house? And I'd always figured they'd have to do something. And part of that was I didn't want them to get out of the habit of having a schedule, because when you have 3 months of unstructured time, then getting back on track in the fall is kind of tough.
It is.
It's like you've got to get yourself back into that I have to be here at this point mindset, whereas if they're completely unstructured, that gets to be difficult.
Yes.
So, but we would kind of swing the other direction and overschedule them in the summer too.
It's hard. It's a hard balance, because
really
you fear of missing out. You don't want to not provide something for your kids that other people are experiencing, and and trying to make it all work. But I think the schedule, I don't know. For me personally, I love having a schedule, and even now, my younger daughter, has mentioned in many a times, especially this summer, because this summer she ended up quitting her job early before she started her PhD program. And so she had like 2 months where she thought she was doing all this stuff, and it turned out nothing really happened. And she was like, she was just like, I think I really should have had a schedule. She's like, it was good for her to have some decompression time, so I don't fault her for that.
Right.
But she had bigger hopes about what she was going to accomplish during this break, and the days just come and go.
Yeah,
and
they do.
So I think she has learned that, okay, maybe I don't have to be as rigid as mom when it comes to a schedule. I don't have to have every moment decided on, but maybe having a schedule is a good thing.
Yep.
And she's actually even talked about now, because now she's in her week 3 of her program. She's like, okay, well, I think we're going to, on these days we're eating out, on these days we're eating at home. Now she's an adult. She's married now.
Yes.
So now she, but she's like, she's thinking about what that schedule looks like for her and her husband, and now that she's going back to school. And I think that all came about because of what we did as kids.
Yeah.
And again, she doesn't like the way I did it, which is great. So now she'll change it to what works for her. But I think she sees the value in it.
Yeah. It's always good to have a schedule.
Yeah.
I think whether it's a loose schedule or a more complex one, it's still a valuable tool for keeping your kids on track. And it gives them a sense of security, I think, when they know I have to be doing this at this point in time. Well, Sheri Waltz, thank you very much. I'm Dianna Kelly, and thanks for listening to Go Tell Mom. Thank you again for joining us on this episode of Go Tell Mom. Again, if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or even something you'd like us to tackle on future shows, comment below, and we'll be back next time and we can grapple together.